The Witch of Old Dixie Highway. I lived in Palm Coast, Florida for most of my young life until I was 21 and moved up north. At the time, Palm Coast and Flagler Beach were developed with mostly separated large housing additions full of streets that all connected to one another, beginning with the same letter. As teenagers driving around, each friend lived in a different section, and we would specify the different developments as the W section, the R section, and so on. It's become more populated over time, so I'm sure a lot of areas have changed, as far as my memory serves. Outside the areas of Palm Coast that were developed, it was mostly wooded areas, with long winding roads that went on for miles into the swampy areas of the Halifax River. They would eventually end in another town such as Ormond or Daytona Beach, if you drove long enough. But nothing in between for a good 45 minutes at least, except dense tree canopies, random side roads and the swamp. If you followed Old Kings Highway, which was equally as isolated, you would eventually find your way to our favorite road to take at night for long drives, Old Dixie Highway. A decent-sized group of us, either in one or two cars depending on how many went, would drive down the highway and side roads leading to nowhere, while blaring music, chain-smoking, shit-talking, and otherwise being normal bored teenagers just trying to have some freedom outside of high school and our part-time jobs. Recently, we had heard about the ruins of an old house that was supposedly haunted by the angry spirit of the woman who had been killed there. A witch, so to speak. She was killed by a small mob after she was suspected of killing animals and abducting a handful of missing children. Her house was then vandalized as well as set on fire. The story went on to say that a group of campers stumbled upon it in the early 90s and set up camp. Their belongings and equipment were found days later by a hunter. Torn sleeping bags, broken lanterns, and clothes everywhere. The entire group was gone. No explanation. On the remaining walls and brick fireplace was graffiti, including satanic symbols. Being the no-fear type of kids we were, naturally we set out around midnight on a Friday to find this place with only our knowledge of the roads and curves themselves that were told to us in the story, to find the location. The story said there would be a set of brick pillar markers hidden in the brush that was the entrance to the property. We followed the winding road into the night full of excitement. This night we took two cars. There were four in one, and myself and my friend Jessica in her brand new 2004 Royal Blue Mustang. I was excited for her and wanted to take this beast out for a spin with her. We came to the large curve in the road where we were told the markers would be. We slowed down and parked on the right side of the road, hoping we had enough room between the water and the side of the road to not sink or be sideswiped if someone came speeding by. Under a huge dead tree, we exited our vehicles, one flashlight and no shortage of nervousness and excitement. The sky was black and we could hear the cries of animals in the distance. Our footsteps echoed as they hit the blacktop. Moss hung everywhere from the large trees that almost covered the area with a canopy of leaves. We made it to a small opening into the trees and I pointed out the nearly demolished markers. The wind picked up and rustled the trees and bushes around us. This was it. The six of us bent back the brush and started to make our way down the path to the old ruins. We were scared at this point and in complete darkness aside from one flashlight that my friend Jeff had while he was leading the pack and a few burning cigarettes in our anxious fingers. The path seemed to get more and more narrow and overgrown as we continued on. A few minutes later, we could see in the distance the brick fireplace that was still standing along with what seemed to be half a brick wall and files of rocks and rubble. I could see faded images drawn on some areas in red, but not completely clear of what they were. The air changed. Everything went still the closer we got. No wind, no sounds. And we were all silent. I stopped in my tracks and peered into the darkness around me. This wasn't right at all. Jessica stopped with me and asked me if I was okay. Jeff went ahead with the others following behind him. I was frozen. Something was here, and it wasn't happy that we were. Within a minute I heard a shriek unlike anything I had ever heard before in my life. It was not one of us. The wind picked up and the branches swayed heavily, angrily, and the sound echoed around us. Out of nowhere I see the flashlight bouncing on the ground, followed by the screams of Jeff and my other three friends. They barreled past us, screaming, "Go! Go!" The flashlight left where it was. Another shriek from the distance. I gathered myself and took off running with Jessica until we made it back to the brick markers. We dispersed onto the road in a state of panic, not really sure what had happened. One of the other girls was crying and raced back to the cars. I turned to look towards the area we had just fled from. It wasn't done. My blood ran cold. The wind picked up. Something was watching us. I could feel it as sure as if I could actually see it coming out from behind the trees. I took off running for the Mustang with Jessica in tow. The others had loaded up into the car behind us and started it. We jumped inside and shut the doors, locking them out of instinct. I still felt it, right outside the car, watching us. Jessica put her keys in the ignition and started it. Nothing. The car behind was pulling away and retreating back down the road the way we came. The Mustang sat in silence. She fired it up again. Nothing. Not even the lights flickered, but the engine kicked and jerked but would not fire. My gaze was set directly in front of me, outside in the dark. I could barely see the old tree we had parked in front of. The hairs on the back of my neck were straight up. This was a warning. This was no game. The fear was real. And whatever it was wanted us to know we were not welcome there again. I was shaking and Jessica was screaming at her car to fire up. Suddenly we got still for a moment, in shock at what was happening. We looked at each other and heard what sounded like a branch being dragged across her driver's side door. And then with that, the feeling in the air changed again. It became almost lighter within an instant. She fired up her car and it started on command. We backed up into the road and made a U-turn to head back up Old Dixie Highway. We could see headlights in the distance. Jeff had come back when they realized we weren't behind him. We made our way around the curve and followed the other car home at a slower than normal pace. We smoked silently, just glancing at one another once in a while, like, what the fuck just happened? We made it back to Palm Coast and stopped at a gas station for some coffee. Jeff never said what he saw back there, and we never told the others exactly what had happened to us in the car. Jessica did have a long scratch down her door, but it wasn't very deep. She told everyone that she parked her clothes to a large bush at some point. We never really talked about it again. We still took weekend night drives here and there, but never went super late at night, or in less than a group of 3. And we never stopped in that area of Old Dixie again.